Right now, the government is proposing new funding models for the healthcare sector, and some are calling for the federal government to actually take over health altogether. So moving forward, what does that mean for the introduction of eHealth services? Will we see the funding needed going into these areas? For more on this and the issue of compliance and regulation around these services, Adam Davenport, CEO of Loop Technology, joins me in the studio now. Welcome. So if you can actually take us through what you see as being eHealth services to begin with?
Well, Helen, I think one of the impacts of these changes is going to be that the federal and state organisations and agencies are going to be sharing information much more perhaps than they have in the past. And when you start to share data, there's the potential for that data to be at risk. And I think this is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on and make sure that federal, state and private enterprise is able to protect the data in an appropriate way.
Okay, and so all the movements that we're seeing now and the talks about different funding, what type of, I suppose, impact might that have on eHealth going forward?
Well, Australia's lagging a little bit behind the rest of the world really in terms of having a legislative or regulatory framework to impose obligations on government and on private enterprise about the way in which they manage health information and, well, a lot of information and data really. And so I think we really probably are going to see an increase in the amount of regulation that the government is going to need to introduce in order to make sure that our information is protected.
Okay, so you have some customers who are working around these eHealth services. What type of questions are they asking you? What are their concerns at the moment?
Well, Loop Technology does a lot of work in the health area, both for government and for private enterprise, and our customers are concerned to make sure that they protect health information. I mean, health data is really sensitive. Financial information is important, but if you lose some financial information, it can be recovered. If you lose health information, it's very sensitive, very personal, and it can be very embarrassing, both to the person who's been storing it, the agency that's been storing it, but also to the individual. So a lot of our customers are looking at the new technologies that are available in the US and in Europe, and looking to take those technologies like data leakage prevention, DLP. In the US, there's been a very high take-up of these types of technologies. In Australia, it's been much slower. And I'm guessing that, and I'm hoping too, that that's going to be something which is going to gather momentum here, and that companies are going to start to use these technologies.
Okay, so are there many examples of people using it well here at home, or is that mainly abroad?
At the moment, some of the large banks and some of the large retail organisations have embraced DLP, but they've done it really as a result of the credit card organisations imposing some obligations on them, so that if you're a retail organisation that transacts business online, there are some strong obligations imposed on you now by the credit card companies to make sure that your environment is secure. But that's a self-regulatory environment. It's not government regulation. And so to answer your question, the uptake here has been slow. We're certainly 2 or 3 years behind in terms of the take-up of some of these technologies.
Okay, so what are the main issues of regulation and compliance that are coming to the fore?
Well, in the US they have what's called the HIPAA legislation, which regulates healthcare specifically, and that imposes a very specific set of obligations on organisations that hold sensitive data. Everything about how the data is stored, how the data is transmitted, so that if your doctor has information about you, it can be transmitted safely to a hospital or to another doctor if you change doctors, and it's done in a way where the data, while it's travelling from point A to point B, is encrypted, it's secure, it's safe. When it arrives at the destination, it's dealt with in a way that's secure. Healthcare organisations in Australia do things like that, but they do them on their own. There's no basic level there's no sort of minimum standard to which they're required to comply. Most of them do a pretty competent job, and certainly our customers are doing things in that space. But there's no baseline set in place by the government as there is in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Japan, places like that.
Okay, so what do we need in Australia to really push this forward?
Well, I think the time's come for the government to put in place some specific guidelines and legislation that says if you are going to be an organisation, whether you're in government or in private enterprise, that's dealing with this type of information, that what you need to do is to meet certain minimum criteria so that consumers, so that people out there in the community can be comfortable that their data is going to be dealt with in a safe and secure way and to a minimum set of standards.
Okay, and do you think that people working within these healthcare organisations are really aware that this is where we're at?
Well, I think that's the other thing. If you're talking about healthcare organisations, they tend to be large. People come and go. There are no obligations on those organisations to train their staff. Most of them do. But, there needs to be some minimum requirements to make sure that the people within those organisations understand the risks. If you've got sensitive data sitting on a laptop, if you leave it at an airline lounge, well, that could be catastrophic for the people whose data appears within that in that system, in that laptop. And there is technology that will prevent that happening. I've been last week in San Francisco at the world's largest security conference, the RSA Security Conference, and there are hundreds of vendors who have technologies that will protect this data in a very sophisticated way. But as I say, companies in Australia have been a lot slower in many cases, not all cases, some have taken up, but in many cases than perhaps in other countries.
Okay, Adam Davenport, thanks for your time and coming in.
Thanks, Helen, a pleasure.